Hope Kids, my name is Esther. Our Bible story is again from the Old Testament book of 1 Samuel. Let's remember what happened in last week's story. God's people wanted a king, so Samuel talked to God about the situation. God said that Saul was to be appointed as king. This is a picture of King Saul. After Saul was crowned king, he became very powerful. Unfortunately, King Saul did not always obey God. He didn't turn out to be the perfect king that everyone had hoped for. He might have been a strong, tall, handsome guy, but his heart was very sinful. He did not want to obey God. One day, Samuel went out with his army to fight the Philistines. Saul wanted to offer sacrifice before the battle so that they could ask God for help. Only Samuel, the priest, could offer sacrifices, but he wasn't there yet. Saul waited and waited, but Samuel didn't show up. Finally, Saul became so impatient that he offered to sacrifice himself. That might not sound like a big deal to you and me, but by offering the sacrifice, Saul was actually disobeying God. As soon as Saul had offered the sacrifice, Saul showed up. "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering, and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling, I thought to myself, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. You acted very foolishly," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." A while later, Samuel sent a message to Saul telling him to go up and fight against their enemies, the Amalekites. Through Samuel, God told Saul to completely destroy all the people and their animals. Saul and his army went out against the Amalekites, like God had said, and they did defeat them, but they didn't obey God completely. Saul allowed the Amalekite king Agag to live, and as well as some of the animals. Saul was proud of himself for obeying God, even though he hadn't obeyed everything that God had said. Only obeying part of God's command is disobedience in God's eye. Obeying God fully is the best way. Samuel came out to meet Saul, and Saul had said, "Look, I did what God said." But Samuel said to him, "If you had obeyed God, why did you allow King Agag and these animals to live?" Saul answered, "We kept the best animals to offer sacrifices to God." "No," said Samuel, "God would rather have you obey him than offer a sacrifice. God cares more about what is in your heart than about burnt offerings. And now, because you did not obey God, God is sorry that he had made you king." It's not hard to see that Saul wasn't perfect. He wasn't a perfect king, and he wasn't a perfect person because his heart was sinful. Saul disobeyed God in many ways, but really, you and I aren't that different from Saul. Maybe we haven't made the exact same mistakes that Saul had made, but we have made our own mistakes. Israel wanted a king, and Samuel had warned them that any human king wouldn't be capable to take care of them. Any human king would fail because no one's perfect except for God. People make mistakes, they sin, and they don't always obey God's ways. What the people really needed was a heavenly king, someone who could rule over them with love and justice. Back in Saul's day, the people were still waiting for a perfect king. But guess what? The wait is over. The perfect king is here. His name is Jesus, and he is the long-awaited king and Messiah that God's people were hoping for. God used the mistakes of human kings to show his people that they really needed was the only perfect heavenly King, Jesus. Jesus is the only king who can truly provide for us and care for us the way we need him to. No king or ruler or the president is as good as Jesus. He is King of Kings. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for everything you have blessed us with. Please help us to make you the king in our hearts, and please help us to remember to obey you in everything. Bye, Hope Kids.